So you've got your wood, now you have to worry about getting it where you want it to be. And unfortunately, wood generally floats. Unless you're getting Mopani or Malaysian driftwood or something like that that is very, very heavy and sinks, then you're probably going to have some issues with it floating away. And there's a variety of ways that you can deal with this. Sometimes people will get rocks and they will tie the wood to the rock using some cotton thread or something like that. It will eventually dissolve. You can weigh the wood down by piling boulders around it. I have rocks in the tank, but they are on this side over here. They're not behind me. So trying to tie up the wood with rocks is going to look a little bit weird. So what I'm going to be doing is, I've got some vinyl stair coverings, and these are pretty cheap. They're, I don't know, $1.50, $2 each. They're a pretty thick material. And I'm going to be fastening these to the bottom of the wood using stainless steel lag bolts and some very large washers to make sure that it's not going to tear through. Now, when you get wood, if you're getting it, you want to get wood that's very, very well dried out so that you're not going to have rotting issues. If you get wood that's still wet, when you move it into the tank, you're going to have a lot higher fungus growth than you will if you get wood that's dried thoroughly after going through rivers. So it'll tend to be very, very buoyant. And what I've done here is I've soaked it for about 3 days. And you can see on this chart here, wood absorbs most of the water that it's going to absorb in about the first 3 days. The first 2 days accounts for about 63% of the water absorption. For softwoods, it's a little bit higher. For hardwoods, it's a little bit lower. But generally, giving it a 2 or 3 day soak means that you're going to be removing most of the buoyancy for the wood. So while this originally floated enough that I could almost stand on it, now it just takes a little bit of a push with a stick for me to get it to sink. So what I'm going to be doing is when I fasten this through, I'm going to be putting it on the bottom side of the wood that I want down, and then I'm going to be using the sand that I'm using to cover it, and I'm just going to be piling it around it. And that sand will be enough weight to keep the wood down, even for the very large pieces. Eventually, the wood will be heavy enough that it would sink on its own. If I removed this, it wouldn't float, but that can take a month or two with very large pieces. You can get around that by heating the water a whole lot, but the reason that that works is it tends to take the water transport in the wood and explode it. It's the same reason that boiling wood makes it sink, and while that does make it sink faster, it also tends to make it rot a lot faster. So I don't particularly want that. I'm just going to be doing it this way because this minimizes rotting while also allowing me to get it where it needs to be. So I'm going to see if I can do this with water in this tank. If not, I'm going to go ahead and drain it and do it where I need it. I'm probably going to need to drain it, but we'll see how it goes. So I don't know if this is visible. Hopefully it is. The water's a little bit murky on the surface. I ended up having to use something a little bit heavier to tie these down. The solution that I ended up going for was several rather large flagstones. If you go to a garden center, you can usually find flagstone that is made of sandstone. This particular stuff, the dark brown, has absolutely no reaction to any sort of acid at all. I've dumped just straight hydrochloric acid on it. There wasn't the slightest bit of bubble. So this should be okay for the tank. I'm not super worried about it. You know, I've got a bunch of limestone over here that's going to slowly dissolve, but my water's not soft enough to really let it. So these tend to be pretty cheap. I got about 20 square feet for about $70. They're pretty heavy, they hold things down pretty well, and they're flat enough that they're going to be super easy to cover by sand in the end. So this shouldn't really be visible as rock here. You can see the large stumps and things are staying down very well with that. The sand that I tried at first had enough weight to it, but if something bumped it, it caused enough motion that the sand would just slough off and then it would float to the surface again. So doing something large enough that it can't move is really making a good difference for this. I don't know how this is going to look long term once I get a good current in here, once I get fish that are digging around, moving stuff around. Hopefully things like this edge here where the two stones come together aren't going to be problematic for corridors or anything, but they should probably mostly be staying around the wood, the sandy areas down here that don't have any rocks or anything, because that's sort of their area, that's their preference. They like to burrow under wood and things. Smaller pieces are pretty easy to just wedge between rocks. So I've got just two rocks stuck together here. That holds this one in place pretty well, even when it's over the top. And this one is part of the outside trunk of the tree, so there's actually a piece of wood that goes back from it where the base of the trunk ran, and I was able to just stick some rocks on that, and it works pretty well. This should all clear up pretty well as soon as I get some pumps in here. Controlling the tannin release of this much wood is going to be interesting. When I find a good solution for that that isn't super expensive, I'll probably make a video about it. It doesn't look super bad right now because I had this soaking for, I guess, I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks. And the water was so dark you couldn't see anything in it, and I went ahead and drained the whole thing, and I'm refilling it right now. But that's worked pretty well. I guess that's it for this update, and we'll see how things are progressing in the next one. I should get plants in middle of this week, and then we can start doing stocking and talking about filtration and things.